Library Foundation report?
Sure, I'd be happy to say a little bit about that. The Lafayette Public Library Foundation is to the tail end of their information and educational program about our library. In the next month, we'll be seeing Speakers Bureau being active at civic and cultural association meetings with a PowerPoint presentation about the facts about what our library brings to our community. And so we're excited to be kind of at the tail end of this year-long awareness campaign that we have engaged with the local PR group here in Lafayette. And we hope that you've seen those billboards. I have seen them, yellow, bright yellow. We're bound together, and it's my library, which were some of the, from the focus groups. There was a lot of people weren't aware that we had actually 9 branches, or that just how extensive, that what our offerings were to the community. So this has kind of been a way to bring that awareness up about our library. And I'd also just like to help our other support group, the Friends of the Library. They're having a fall book sale Wednesday, September 15th through the 18th. And they're really excited to have an actual in-person book sale again. I think this is their second. Of course, like everyone, they were disrupted during COVID, and these are the sales by which the funds generated supporting the library with maybe some of the programming and different items that the library needs. So please think about supporting them, and by doing so, you can stock your shelves and also help the library.
Same location?
It's going to be at the, yes, the Hyman. We'll be back. We're trying to get back to normal a little bit.
Good.
So, but we need people's support, and they work, these are all volunteers, and they work very, very hard to have a great sale that everyone knows about and how wonderful the selections are for our cover. So, thank you.
I've gotten some wonderful books that normally I would have paid $40, $50 had I been in a bookstore. I got it for $1.50 or $2.
It is a great recycler.
Yeah.
Question. The times, starting and ending?
Let's see. I'll pull it up for you. Fall book sale. Wednesday, September 15th, 3 to 8, and that's Friends Day. You have to kind of be the elite, but you might find out about how to be an elite to get into that one. The public sale is Thursday, 9 to 8, Friday, 9 to 6, and Saturday, 9 to 2.
September
15th, 16th, 17th, and 18th at the Hyman Convention Center Ball.
And Saturday's 9 to 2?
2.
Okay, great. And that's the Hyman Center Ballroom?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Boyd. Director report, Mr. Delane.
Yes, sir. Okay, so before I start, since we already start with staff changes, I want to let you all know we've been delaying filling some positions and eliminating other positions, and we've also been promoting people. And taking it out of context, this might seem counterintuitive. It might appear like we are giving some or all of our savings to remaining staff in the form of promotions and raises. And I've heard a couple of comments around about this possibility. And I just want to let you all know, I know how this looks, and it's not the case. I can't operate the library without certain key management positions, and civil service rules allow you to work below your class but not above it. And I do have a plan that's a work in progress, so I can't just tell you what I'm going to do, what the benefit will be. Sometimes I have to wait and see how the pieces fall into place before I can make a move or quantify or put into words what we've accomplished. But in the announcement about staff changes that I'm going to make, part of it, we've promoted 5 librarians in management positions this past month or so, 2 regional managers and 3 librarian 3s. And the newly promoted people are going to cost the library $19,000 a year less combined than the previous incumbents. And by making these moves, I'm going to be able to eliminate a children's librarian position and save over $57,000 a year. And we're going to downgrade a vacant librarian position, which will realize a minimum of $5,000 in savings a year. I made my estimate on the most expensive person in the position we're going to downgrade to. I have fair warning for you. I'm still going to need to fill some positions, and some of them are librarians, but these recent moves, just the ones in the recent month or so, are going to save us $81,000 a year going forward and this year. And I sometimes move slowly, but I don't stop moving. So sometimes you might just have to stare at me for a while and wait until you see, oh, he did move. So with that said, we promoted Anna Broad to be the head of the children's department in the main library. Connie Milton will now be our outreach librarian. And Criddle, you were not allowed to use her first name. Criddle is been promoted to be the assistant manager at South. And Victoria Coleman has moved into the Adult Services Department at Maine. We have lost a couple of people, and we currently have, I divided it in vacancies that I want to fill and vacancies I'm trying not to fill. We currently have a children's librarian at West that we need to fill. We have an Adult Services librarian at Maine. That's the position we're going to downgrade. We don't know to what yet. We have a library associate at Maine, some LTAs at Maine and South, and in the outreach department. We have several LTA, library technical assistant positions that we're not filling, and we have 2 librarian positions that we're currently not attempting to fill, and the plan is to eliminate them, which overlaps into the cost-cutting parade. So Larry found that we can reupholster many of our chairs. I think he mentioned this at the last meeting, but he went on to check it. And we have 6 chairs in need of replacement that will be reupholstered instead, and the estimate is going to be about $1,000 or more per chair that we're going to save. And we'll be able to replicate this going forward, hopefully. I mentioned that we filled 5 management positions, and we're eliminating a children's librarian position and downgrading a position. We are also working to reduce the warehouse space, and we're in the process of renegotiating the lease, and by we, Larry. Savings will be approximately $25,000 a year. So our total projected annual savings since the last time we met is about $106,000. So that brings our operation savings up to date to about $290,000 a year. So we're working on it. In other news, we are adhering to the governor's mask mandate. Library staff are required to wear masks when not sitting at their desks in a non-public area. Patrons are required to wear masks. We are not mean about it. I met with the mayor president, and he was very nice. I met with Michael Lunsford, also very nice. I had a telephone meeting with former councilman and current political community leader Christopher Williams. Larry Benton and I attended the parish council's budget hearing, and Councilman Knockham had many nice things to say about the library. The summer reading program is over, and the Lafayette community logged over 2 million words read, which was our goal. And during that time, over 28,200 unique library cards were used in the months of June and July. If you consider that Lafayette has a population in the parish of 230,000, that's pretty good. Back in July, 2020, we were open 50% capacity. So our computer usage this month was up 43% compared to last year. Visits, library visits were up 16%, first-time checkouts up 7%, and our library programs increased by a third, and attendance was up by about a fifth. And last but not least, the registrar of voters will be hosting voter registration at 4 of our regional libraries, one a day from September 23rd to September 26th. They've done this before with me in the days when I was a mere simple librarian. And so that would be nice. It's late in the month, close to the election, and the registrar of voters actually reached out to us to find out, is this a big deal or not? And so they put a table in the front. People walk in, they say, "Hi, are you registered to vote? Would you like to register to vote?" And my experience is some people will ignore them, and some people register to vote, and some people just go chat with them. So, but that's what's going on, and the exciting part's coming up, because Larry with buildings and finances. Unless you have questions or comments about what I said.
And the reason for not filling many of these positions is?
We can do the work without them. We can redistribute the work. We can be more efficient.
Is it because less people are coming in?
No.
Less demand?
This
No?
is based strictly on where we've seen we can do it without them.
Very good.
Because if we did it the other way, it would be the thing that I'm always afraid of every time I make a change. Breaking the library.
I have a comment. Thank you, Danny, for continuing to look for opportunities to save money. That's a huge help, of course. Last meeting, we talked about changing, you presented the idea of changing hours, and we left it up to your discretion to kind of decide when that would take place, how that would take place. Have you gotten anywhere with that?
September 1st.
Okay.
Sorry, forgot all about that.
September 1st?
Yes.
Okay, great.
It's just for Maine.
No, Maine and South Regional.
Question,
Yes?
Danny, will you be able to track the numbers like you have been to see if there's any appreciable drop-off in patronage?
Yes.
So that's going to be a measure of whether this continues indefinitely, or you're going to kind of look at it, maybe take a running average over a
Yeah,
period of time.
we can look at the numbers to see over the next several months what our foot traffic is. Yeah.
Thank you.
And Dan, thank you.
You're welcome.
Echo Stephanie said, it's much appreciated. I know it's not easy, and I know you're not doing it alone, so. Thank you to everybody involved with that. Terry, I'm sure you're going to.
Yeah, the staff has really stepped up. We're doing some cross-training, and some of our library associates are now fidgeting in the circulation desk. So we're multitasking and trying to stretch ourselves. So I think, like I said, the staff have really come together and they're working very hard.
Thank you.
All right, I guess we're
Mr.
good.
Rogel,
Yep. Facilities and financial report.
facilities update,
All right, included in your packet is the monthly financial report. And as of August 10th, 2021, we have collected $10.7 million in revenues, and we have spent $8.8 million. Anybody have any questions, finance related? Yes, sir.
Has the library received any kind of information or letter from the federal government regarding approximately $47,000 in money given to each library branch?
We have received notification from the state library, which I believe we mentioned in a previous meeting.
Yeah.
We mentioned that in a previous meeting.
Okay.
All libraries in Louisiana are getting an equal portion. Lafayette Parish is getting its equal portion of $47,000. It's not per library location. It's per parish, basically. We're getting $47,000.
That's for the whole library system, not each branch?
Correct.
Okay. There are restrictions on how that is to be spent?
Correct.
Do we have a plan on how that will be spent?
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Yeah. Okay. Anything else related to finance?
Let's see. The North Regional Library, the roofing thing, that's completed, or are we still in negotiation with the contract?
Contract. No, the roofing's going to be part of the North Regional upgrades.
That's the whole upgrade?
Yeah. And I'll get to that in the facilities.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Included in your packet is a facilities report. The main library roof replacement. We should have the architect's contract amended here soon, which will allow us to get started on writing specs for this project. South Regional Library upgrades. The architect is moving forward with providing us a detailed pricing estimate. North Regional Library, we're going to meet with the architect on Monday, August 23rd, to finalize the scope of work, detail out what we discussed, new metal roof, HVAC, and he's going to provide us with a detailed pricing list as well. As Danny mentioned, we did recover one chair, but we happen to have stock fabric, so I didn't exactly know what the potential savings would be if we continue to recover chairs versus purchasing new. So I obtained pricing of an exact make and model of the chair that would be recovered. I obtained a price of what it would cost new with the same fabric I would recover with. There's two model chairs, so the savings came in between $650 and $1,000 per chair. And I do have 6 chairs at the warehouse that I plan on getting recovered. That'll save warehouse space, but also utilize existing assets, saving money at the same time, and then it'll allow us to pull additional chairs off the floor to have recovered once those are done. So.
How many chairs are you talking about there? You know, like the total number of chairs?
Over time, it'll vary. Right now, I'm working on
Hundreds?
6 for South Regional Library and 2 for North Regional Library, but there are more chairs on site that probably need to be recovered. I'm just targeting what I have at the warehouse.
Right.
And I can't do too many at one time because then the patrons won't have anywhere to sit. So I'm just rotating them as, then again, it all depends on if I can hold this recover. I mean, if he retires, I have to start over. So, give it a try.
I'm curious, Larry, how much fabric do we have? How much fabric?
Oh, I'm out. It was basically stock fabric that came with the purchase of the original chairs.
Okay. so
And
it's like-
because we bought so many of the same chairs that had the same fabric, I think I had like 12 yards of one fabric. So I had enough to do one chair for sure, but after that, it's down to like 1 yard per type of fabric. So I don't have enough to redo a chair for free like that.
So you're gonna, can you
So I have to
match
purchase the
that?
fabric.
Can you-
They don't
similar?
make some of them.
Yeah, but you could get the same tones or?
Yeah, I've already selected some
Oh, okay.
replacement fabrics, yes, and I've gotten pricing for the fabric alone.
No, I have a question.
Sure.
The upholsterer himself, would it be possible, and I'm just asking a question, to negotiate a price to do all of the chairs, even though you're not going to do them all at once, but to negotiate, look, I got 30 chairs that need to be recovered. Can you give me a price on the totality of 30 chairs and maybe negotiate it down a little bit because it's a bulk, you do it in bulk? And
Possibly, but I can't guarantee him that I would give him that many chairs. It would all depend on how fast he could do it.
Right,
versus, I could look at it like that.
yeah, I didn't know
Consider
if
it.
there was a possibility, maybe he might want to,
I
he
could,
could negotiate that way, or we could approach him that way.
sure, I
And
could.
float the idea to him at least and say, look,
Yeah.
you know, because if he's looking at it, goes, I'm going to propose the 3 chairs,
Right.
the price is going to be different than if he knows he's got work to do 20.
Yeah, it also depends on the chair as well, because there's different make and models in our system.
Okay.
So he's familiar with one,
Right.
and have 3 more just like that. So I know that's gonna go fast.
Okay.
But I have 3 others that are different.
Okay.
So he's gonna have a learning curve on the first one. So it just depends on many different factors. So I really need to know all the chairs I plan on doing next year. And then, being it's on a larger scale, I probably have to do something a little more formal, and possibly through the purchasing office. It just depends.
I know.
Yeah,
It's just an idea.
yeah, sure, it's a great one. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, related to furniture, we had 2 teen stools downstairs at the main library that were replaced under warranty. No cost to the library or the taxpayers. Like Danny mentioned, we are working on downsizing our warehouse. I've been working on this for a while, probably about 3 or 4 years now. We have 17,900 square feet of warehouse space that will be reduced down to 11,060 square feet. I estimate our savings to be between $25,000 and $30,000 annually. Just trying to work with the landlord and get that finalized. Then the contract amendment has to go through LCG's legal department and the administration for signature. We're trying to get this done by the first of the new fiscal year, November 1. Could be faster, but I'll stick with that date for now. North Regional Library, we finally retired our public printer that we've been using since 2007. That printer has reached over 1.3 million pages. And we've, replaced rollers and kits on it several times, and it's just been unreliable, so we went ahead and replaced it. And to put it in perspective, here at Main Library, the second floor printer has already reached 1 million pages since 2015. So second floor is a hot spot for printing, so what we're going to do, we have 3 other printers in the building, so we'll swap them out and put some of that wear on another printer and kind of rotate them. We do like to standardize printers, and that's why we're rotating, so that we never have cartridges we can't use. So that's what's going on, and that's all I have today.
Thank you, Mr. Rangel.
Sure.
Any other discussion? Okay, we have no unfinished business. New business. Northeast Regional Library. So, I'll just kind of start to say, this is on here. I'm not sure who actually requested. Was it you, Mr. Delaney? So, it's really just to put it out there, to let people know, hey, this is not something that we're ignoring or just hoping it goes away. Just to publicly address the issue, the fact that, it is something that's still on the table, but there's a lot of factors involved in when that could happen, or if that can happen, when it can happen, how it happens, where it happens. And I'll just let you take over there, Danny.
Is a known fact that is sort of unknown, in the sense that we have money in our capital budget that was put there by the outgoing Consolidated Council to build a library that we shall temporarily call it Northeast Regional to make it easy. And, but there is no money in our budget to operate. Last year, LCG's budget showed that we were $1.6 million in the hole, revenue to spending, 1.8, sorry. This year, the budget that you just approved, LCG estimates that we're $1.3 million in the hole, so that's a $500,000 improvement. Larry tells me that that's actually closer to $800,000 in the hole, which puts us $1 million ahead, but it's still $800,000. And so with that, if we were to open another library, we'd be up to that $1.8 million in deficit. And why I wanted it to be on the agenda was so that I could say out loud that there are things that could be looked at in a post-millage renewal situation. Milton sits between South and East Regional Libraries, gets regular use with limited hours. It's open 5 days a week for 45 hours. It only costs about $300,000 to use. It's got limited but consistent foot traffic, low but consistent public access computer use, and it has 1.5 staff members. If we were to only be open 6 days a week at North, West, and East, and only open one shift a day. So one night a week maybe, and that night we open a little later. So right now they're open 9 to 8. So if they were open 9 to 5, and then on their night they were open 12 to 8. I don't know how the math works on this exactly with the hours. I'm just throwing numbers out. That would allow those libraries combined to free up about 5 staff positions. If Main and South closed on Sundays, from what the managers told me when I took the interim appointment, I got all the managers together and I told them all of my wildest, craziest ideas to prepare them and to make everything else I would do seem sane. And one of those things was cut Sunday hours and a bunch of other things, and much confusion ensued, but we would save about another 6 positions if we did that. And that scenario potentially would offer us enough staff positions to staff a Northeast Regional Library at the same number of hours as North, West, and East are open. Now, we would be over $1 million in the hole again, because that doesn't account for the $500,000 to operate the library, and we haven't eliminated the existing budget deficit. But it's something we haven't said out loud, so that the rest of the people in Lafayette can consider whether or not, would I give up an hour of service or a day of service so that someone who doesn't have service can have service? I'm not even saying it will work, but I think that we need to look at everything, and I think that the people who are requesting this library need to know that we are looking at everything and that we're taking this seriously. And none of these ideas would be simple, fast, or painless for the rest of the parish or for library staff. Plus, you're looking at 4 to 5 years to build a library. But I wanted you to put it on the agenda so I could say these things so that y'all could think about it moving forward. I know there's not a chance in the world we're breaking ground on a library in the very near future. If y'all were to say today, and you can't because it's discussion, if y'all were to say today, let's build a library, by the time we broke ground, we'd be renewing our second tax. But it gives you something to think about after the election about what are you willing to consider? What would you like the library to look at? what do we talk to the communities that are served by these libraries that are open right now? How do we approach it and say, you know, we have this is how we got here, this is what you have, this is what we, depending on who you are, this is how it's going to sound, this is what we want to take away from you, but this is what you'll continue to have. And I thank you for letting me put it on the agenda so I could say it, so that the board could have something, some sort of glimpse inside the hamster inside of my head and what he's doing. So going forward, and it's not something that we have given specifics to. It's me poking my head in an office and saying, so how much does this cost? And then Larry begrudgingly giving me a number because he's afraid I'm going to say it in public without giving him time to like make sure it's the exact number. And but we are thinking about it, and I want the people who would be served by that area to know that we are constantly in the library thinking about it and trying to figure out if there's a way to do it. And it feels like we are only thinking about a way to shrink that budget deficit, but we're trying to do both, and we just haven't found a way yet. So that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Danny, for that presentation. We appreciate the thought and being presenting it to us today. And what I heard you say is that even if we could figure out how to do the building and the staffing, we would still be left with having to find how to the operational expenses. But I want to focus on personnel that you mentioned. If I understood you correctly, you said early on you had this discussion with some of the staff to figure out, can we rearrange things and make things work? And in this discussion, you just said how we could do it, but there would be pain involved even for the library staff. And so I'm thinking about that, and if I'm correct, that was early on when you first took over. And then to the point that Terry brought out, the staff has already been working and multitasking and taking on new responsibilities. So in light of that information that y'all presented tonight, that the staff is already taking on new responsibilities and maybe additional tasks that they had not before, does that mean that there would be even more pain for the staff? Do you understand my question?
No, different pain.
Okay.
Different pain. So what the staff is going through right now is an adjustment. We haven't broken out the canes or anything like that. We're not like standing over the staff. No one's being beaten or anything. There have been some adjustments to how we do things. If we were allowed to, if we thought it was a good idea, and we were allowed to then change the hours for these locations, freeing up the staff pain would be more of an adjustment to their schedules change. Their workload would not increase. Their schedules would change. People would move from locations. This new location would be staffed. I mean, ideally it would be staffed by vacant positions that were then put over there. But that's what I mean. It would just be change. And most people don't really like change. But all of the reorganization of work within the buildings, we would not be adding to that. We would just be changing the hours they're open, people getting used to a new schedule, that kind of stuff.
So for those people that were in agreement with it when you initially met and came up with this idea, or do you think they would still feel the same way today, even though the different changes and personnel changes and stuff?
I think so.
I think another thing you have to consider is not just changes for the staff, but also for the public. So in order to have enough staff to operate a totally new branch, as Danny mentioned, we may have to close on Sundays. And that's a whole Sunday of people not having access to study rooms or not having access to meeting rooms. And if we change just opening till 8 one night a week at South or North or East, then that's you know, now we're open 4 days a week till 8, or starting September 1st, we'll be open 4 days till 8 o'clock at night. And if we just go down to 1 day a week, then that's 3 nights where someone can't stay late at the library studying, they can't meet for a group project, they can't have an organizational meeting in our meeting room. So, you know, there are costs involved with that. And so, once again, like Danny mentioned, that's something where the community would have to kind of buy into that. Like, we're willing to not be able to visit our favorite location at the same hours and times that we were able to visit in order for the northeast part of the parish having access to a brand new library. But, you know, I don't think we can take our existing staff and man a whole new building without, like I said, cutting hours and making some pretty drastic changes in some instances. You know, we're already kind of stretched thin, and so I don't really see, we can't be more efficient, you know, not to that extent.
And to Terry's stretch thin, Mark, we are, I mean, because of where our vacancies occurred, when I mentioned the promotions, we're filling positions right now and keeping the same number of vacancies because we have qualified people to promote. I think Terry was interviewing people today for some of the vacant positions that I mentioned that are at the lower end. So finally, we were interviewing people who don't already work in the library. So it wasn't like, okay, so Larry's going to get a promotion. I guess I'm out of a job. Larry's going to get a promotion, and now I have to fill Larry's job. So I have gone from one position filled and one empty to a different position filled and a different one empty. So hopefully things will get better, but the suggestions that I'm making about where we would come up with a staff for a Northeast Regional is the total positions, vacant or filled, that we have right now, that would be eliminated by making some difficult decisions on hours. And so it's a whole parish thing. Everyone in the parish has sort of got to be reasonably close on the same page before I'm going to ask you to say, make that public decision and say, go ahead, Danny, do this. And because ultimately it will end up being your decision. But I wanted you to know that we are looking at everything.
Danny, I just want, just to be very, very clear, because I don't want any of this, I want it to be very emphatically clear on how this is portrayed or heard.
Yes.
Because the scenario that you're talking about right now is assuming this millage passes in October.
Yes.
And it's assuming, but it's also, the millage is passed, and then we're still operating in a deficit.
We would still need to find money to operate this library. So if the millage passed, looking at this is as far as I've gotten. Is I could get to a point right now where I am in just as terrible a financial situation as I am at the moment with library service in different places. So we would just be shuffling around library service, moving it here, taking it away here, changing some hours. But financially, we would be no better off. We might even be a little worse off. So we are not, I am not giving you a scenario that says we could break ground, build a library, and then I'm giving you a scenario that says we are looking at everything. Nothing is sacred, nothing is not being considered, and we will not bring you anything. I will not bring you anything that is not well thought of and much more fiscally responsible. What I'm talking about, I am not proposing this. This is not a proposal. What I'm talking about, if you are someone who looks at the library and thinks it's fiscally irresponsible to operate at an $800,000 a year deficit, you will look at a library that moves things around and builds another branch as being even more fiscally irresponsible because we'd be at least $1 million down. So no, I just wanted people to know that we are trying to find any way in our current situation that we could make headway. And once we find a direction that works, maybe we find more savings. I mean, please do not count on another month like this past one where we just magically find 6 figures in annual savings. This was a very good month for finances. A good timing. But no, we're not saying that we can afford to open a library. We're just saying we're looking at everything. We're looking at what we have that exists, what we have that doesn't exist, and what moves. I'm sure there's more that we can look at for here, but I've been looking at this for like a month or so, trying to figure out something that I could bring to you that you'd be willing to let me bring to you. And this is what I got. It's a start.
George?
Danny, if we have the money, as I understand it, and please correct me if my understanding is wrong, we have the money to actually build a building,
Yes,
but we don't have the money to operate it.
correct.
So we can buy the car, but we can't put gas in it, and we can't pay
Or
for
get
the
insurance. Correct.
Okay, so we got a car. We have bought a brand new car. It's sitting in our driveway, and it's pretty, but we can't do anything with it.
Correct.
Okay, so this is where we are at this moment,
Yes.
which means that things would have to change in order to be able to build that building or rent a space, so we don't have home ownership, which we're experiencing with North Regional and South Regional and the main roofs and the air conditioning and the right?
Yes.
Okay. So that we're looking at that too, is instead of taking the money that was allocated to build the building, could we use that for a long-term lease in a facility that we don't own? Is that a possibility? Or is that not on the
That
table?
would be, to continue with your analogy, that would be like finding a really good lease option on a
Right.
car that I can't afford to put gas in or buy insurance on. We're in the same boat. Yes, we could probably find a way. We could probably find a way to get a long-term lease on a building
Right.
that we could not operate,
But it
as
would be
opposed to
less,
building a building that we can't operate.
but if we did a long-term lease, the money, it wouldn't cost as much as constructing a physical building.
Correct.
So the money that, let's say it's a third of the cost,
All right.
the 2/3 of the money that we don't spend on actually constructing and owning a physical structure could be used to operate it.
In theory, but it would be just like what we're doing right now, where we take money out of our fund balance to make
Yeah.
up the difference.
Uh-huh.
And so that fund balance, so we would be leasing a library that we are paying for out of our savings,
Okay?
and then
But that just kicks the can down the road.
it kicks the can down the road.
Larry,
And
that's true.
the
Okay.
scariest thought process to me is,
And then,
let's build someone a library and then open it and then say 5 years of watching us build a library and 5 years of having a library and then going to the library and saying, oh, what's that nice van in front of the library? Oh, that's the bookmobile because the library's closed. They couldn't afford it.
right, okay, so
Right.
that,
So yeah,
that's,
we're in the same boat. Either way.
that's really, it puts us in the same boat, it just takes the boat down the road a little bit.
Right.
Or downstream a little bit.
Yes.
Okay, so that's not really a viable option, although not owning a building in the long run is less expensive conceivably.
Yes.
Okay. So parish-wide, you're looking at parish-wide. The public would have to be on board with the reality of, we only have so much money. We don't have an unlimited budget, where we can just do it and say, okay, the money's going to materialize for us. We have X dollars. We can only spend X dollars. So does the parish, the population of the parish, have to look at, am I willing to give something up so those people who are underserved can have something.
Possible.
Okay, and just, you mentioned that.
Yes,
and
I mentioned
I'm-
it, because the scenarios that's the scenario I've constantly been presented with is, you have money to build a library, build the library. And the scenario that we always come back with, the library has come back with it since before me, but we can't operate the library. We
Right.
can't staff it, we can't put stuff in it. And so,
I can buy a car,
That-
put it in
yes,
my driveway, I can't drive.
so now what I'm wondering is maybe ride share. And so, no, so we started looking at, are there places that we could adjust things and what would it free up?
Yeah.
And our first version of this that you heard is we could free it up and increase our deficit. But not increase our deficit by $1 million a year. We would still increase our deficit and we would burn through our fund balance. So,
And then we're left with,
and
again,
then we're left with a bunch of empty buildings.
understood,
Yes. Working.
which is not, that's not a good option.
Not a good
Kicking the can down the road doesn't
Correct.
help anyone.
We're trying really hard not to.
Not to do that. Let's deal with what we have to deal with. So that may mean, ultimately, if we want to do that, that some people who are served well may, in the public, and this is the question for the public, not me personally,
Yes.
may be willing or would have to be willing to give something up
Correct.
in order to be able to operate, not build, operate a library for those people who are underserved.
Yes.
In essentially that northeast corner of the parish.
Yes.
Okay. In that section of the city, how far is the main library to them? From the furthest outreach of Lafayette Parish on the northeast corner, do we know how many miles that is to the main?
I do not.
Okay.
I could find that. I do not.
Just a question. And then how far is it from that to the North Regional Library? You know, what's the, so in other words, is the library geographically, the branch is geographically centered in a way that the most people with the most need are served? Not necessarily the most people with the most need are served.
I would have to.
Okay, just questions.
You're talking about the northeast? Because the issue with that is, I mean, we looked into the distance, if you, in the last year or so, I remember we looked at all that a little bit. The issue is that the I-49 corridor,
You have Evangeline Thruway
right,
and I-10.
that's what kind of alienates
It
that area.
coordinates off that
Right.
section of the city.
Right,
So
so it's
that,
not so
so
much
there's a
distance.
natural barrier that exists beyond just the mileage.
Right.
But-
Because we have quite a few in that, within a certain mile, I forgot what the mileage was, but you've got the Chenier branch, you've got, Maine, and Butler, that's right. And even north to a degree, I mean, well, not, probably not.
Chenier and Butler are within a mile of the main library,
Yeah.
but they still have some patrons that only go to those locations.
And they're all on that side of
Right.
the
But those are options.
I-49 corridor.
As far as like, you know, do we close a location and take that staff?
Right.
You know, there are always options.
It's a good question to be revisited and looking at that. Because that's, even when we get to that point when we're like, hey, if we say we have the money and we could do it, then we got to decide, that's the next big question, and that was a big
Where?
topic, is exactly where, and you just nailed it, I think. Not where is the greatest number of people, but the greatest number of people in need that will use it in the northeast part of the parish in that area. So I think there's a lot of disagreement on that, even some of the people in that area. I'm glad that you brought this to us, Dan,
Yes, Danny, thank you so much. I do live in the area that you're speaking about, and it is obvious there's an access problem. It's sorely needed, and so I appreciate that the thought going into this scenario that might work. And I love how things present themselves. It seems like when things seem impossible, that's when possibilities present themselves. And so I think it's great that we're at least, trying new scenarios or thinking about new ways to serve this part of our parish. And, live up to our word and get that library functioning in some way, hopefully, to a point of a, brick and mortar building, if we can gather our city behind our library, for sure. So thank you, Dan, for presenting this scenario. It's interesting and a great take on how to get it moving, even when things seem almost impossible. Thank you.
One more discussion? Okay. Library post-election scenarios. This is also you, Mr. Delaney. But let me interrupt just real quick. So one of the things as part of this, I just kind of would like, and I don't know if this is the time, but kind of like for council to, because there seems to be some lack of clarity, I guess, on what exactly we can and cannot do as board members as far as this, any type of campaigning or pushing for this upcoming millage and any future millages, the legalities of that, and the legalities with staff as well. So, can we let Mr. Avery talk on that just for?
Sure, I'd be happy to do
Okay,
that.
thank you.
So there's a provision in both the Louisiana Constitution and in a state statute which basically adopts the Louisiana constitutional provision word for word that addresses this issue. And it says, probably should just read it, it's very short. This is in the Constitution, it's Article 6, Section 4. It says, no public funds shall be used to urge any elector to vote for or against any candidate or proposition, or to be appropriated to a candidate or political organization. This provision shall not prohibit the use of public funds for dissemination of factual information relative to a proposition appearing on an election ballot. That identical provision, word for word, appears in the election code as well. And the provision in the election code also carries with it a criminal penalty. So it's something to be considered and taken seriously. And there are a couple of cases that have talked about this, and the Attorney General has rendered quite a few opinions about this. To put it into a nutshell, what is permitted across the board is factual information relative to the proposition. For example, I think at the previous meeting, I don't remember if it was you, Danny, or you, Larry, there was an extended discussion of various scenarios as to what kind of funds the library may have available if the millage passes, if the millage fails, what are your options. Those things are purely factual. No issue there with dealing with those kinds of issues across the board. Public funds can be used for that. Public employees can talk about that on public time. It can be done in a public building. None of that is an issue. Where you run into a problem is where you're urging. And what does urge mean exactly? I mean, we can all look at the dictionary and see what urge means, but basically to try to influence someone to either vote for or against the proposition. Basically, you should think about the word urge. Obviously, there's an overlap there because if you see that there's some kind of a dire financial consequence for the failure to adopt the proposition, but you're presenting factual information about that, I mean, that might be considered to some people to be urging, but it's purely factual information, so you don't really get to that point. Where you get to that point is when you are engaging in advocacy to encourage someone to either vote for or vote against the proposition. That's where the problem comes in. That cannot be done by use of public resources. It can't be done by library employees, for example, on on the library time. It can't be done in a public building. It can't be done using public funds. You can't use library stationery to send out advocacy information, things like that. That's where you run into problems. Obviously, there's a lot of gray area there. If a public employee is on their own time, they are generally permitted to do that. And just so you civil service employees know, there's a Civil Service Rule 10 that deals with political activities. It's generally directed toward candidates and not toward propositions. There are some potential overlaps there too. This, for example, it's not really in play here, but just so you know, if you're using an issue as a proxy for a candidate, just an example made up, two candidates for an election, one is obviously pro-life and one is obviously not. If you say I'm pro-life, you could be interpreted as advocating for that candidate. So you got to be careful there. Generally, in this circumstance, away from your public job, if you're not being paid with public funds, not using any public facilities, then there's generally not a prohibition with regard to advocacy for a proposition as opposed to a candidate, even for a civil service employee. You still have to be careful about that. If you have questions, I would urge you to talk to Adam Marcantel, who I spoke to about this, by the way. But generally, what board members would be permitted to urge away from this board meeting, not using the public library facilities, not using public library employees. Obviously, the foundation, which is connected to but is not part of the library system. This is part of the reason that the foundation exists in the first place. It can do certain things that a public entity cannot do. So the foundation, Friends of the Library, things like that, their advocacy is more wide open. Generally, as board members, and there's an AG opinion about this very thing from 2016 that says that a board use of library employees when they're being paid, those kinds of things, and then you're limited solely to factual information about the proposition. And those are the guideposts. And if you run into any particular situations as we go along, I'd be happy to address those as well.
So just as theoretically speaking, if I were to say in a meeting, please go out and...
Not this meeting, or you make a board
No, in a board
If
meeting.
you say in this meeting, please go out and vote for this proposition,
Yeah.
I think you probably should not do that.
Okay. That's just theoretically.
Please go out and vote,
Yeah,
You can say that.
no problem.
yeah.
And that's done all the time.
Could you what?
Please go out and vote,
Please go out and vote,
period.
period.
Yes.
And if we do speak publicly on the issue, we can speak in favor or against something as a board member.
Yes. If
Just
you go to the
not-
Rotary Club,
Yes, okay.
and you're not, I assume you don't get your expenses reimbursed by the library, or if there's no public money of any kind involved, and you're on your quote-unquote own time, no problem. You can urge.
When you cross the threshold of a public building, that's the demarcation line.
Yes, generally.
Okay.
For you, this public
For
building,
this, for us, this public building,
Yes.
when we cross the threshold in the store.
that's a problem. Yes,
Okay.
We can do it in another public building.
potentially. We have to talk about that if it gets down to that. If you go to a council meeting and you want to urge, we need to talk
Yes.
about that before you urge.
Okay, because that is something,
Well, you-
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
okay. Well, we do need to talk then.
They have the same issue. Like if this comes in front of the parish council and they want to talk about this, they can talk about what the financial picture might look like for the library if the proposition is passed versus not passed. That's factual. But if they start saying, because of this, I would urge everybody to X.
And I'm just kind of curious, what would the consequences be?
There's a criminal
It's
provision.
criminal?
Yeah. I mean, it would be up to the DA to decide whether it rises to the level of something that would be prosecuted, but it's a criminal There's a criminal
Which would
provision
include
associated.
jail time, possibly, and/or fines.
I can read to you. It says, whoever violates any provision of this section shall be fined not more than $1,000 or be imprisoned with or without hard labor for not more than 2 years or both.
That could be, it could be a felony.
Script.
Could be a felony, yeah.
Could be, yeah. Wow.
They'll give you a script.
Well, it sounds like, anyway. Okay.
Sure.
Thank you.
Sir.
Yes, thank you very much. I know I was a little bit off, but I just wanted to have that context. And again, so Danny, I know you asked to put this on as well. The purpose is not to be, this is not a doom and gloom.
No,
This is not to scare people, or this is just to say, just like hope for the best and prepare for the worst.
if it failed in October, I would want to come to the board and ask you to make changes to prepare us, because in April, if we got to April and it failed, we lose 40% of our budget, and so it's a 40% cliff. It's a little less than that, but it's a good round number. So rather than take it all in one shot, if we failed in October, I would ask the board to consider letting us make some of the changes that I mentioned for rearranging services and money and staff without the possibility of a Northeast Regional Library. As Councilman said at the budget hearing, so if this tax fails, I don't get a library? No, sir. You do not. So, and we would probably reduce our materials purchasing because we would want to save as much money as we could going into April to have a smaller cliff to fall off of if the tax failed. If the tax passes, we continue going where we're going, trying to find places to cut, trying to balance our budget. If the tax failed a second time and we lost the 40%, I just wanted you to know that we could operate Maine and South with the budget that's left. We could operate Maine and take your pick of 2 of the other directional regional libraries. We would definitely experience layoffs and reduce materials purchasing if the tax failed twice, because with only 60% of our libraries left, presumably we would have 60% of our staff and 60% of our materials. And so the decision would have to come up at some point, what do you want to keep open? And I wanted to, very much like all of the ideas need to be on the table if we're trying to figure out, can we serve this area? All of the ideas need to be on the table if it fails as to how do we continue to provide as much service as possible with 60% of the resources. And we have posted a variety of things to social media and our site about where does the money go. You know, we have this much money that we spend every year, and this percentage is at South, this percentage is administration, and we broke it down to show what the administrative costs actually are. We've shown usage since the last tax election at the various areas, and we also showed a picture of what $1 million, which is approximately our budget deficit right now, looks like in terms of the library. We let the public know in a nice graphic that $1 million is everything that we purchase. Every book, every video, every downloadable material we publish. And then the next week we showed what does $5 million look like, which would be the amount of money we would be out if we lost this millage. And There was a nice circle, we had the idea of the price, and it was a variety of things. And we were very clear, this is not what we're doing if the tax fails. We're trying to give people a visual of, I don't know what $5 million looks like. I don't think I've earned $5 million over the course of my life. So I have no idea what it looks like, but in library terms, I now know that it looks like three small regionals, and all of our materials. It looks like the South Regional Library and one of the small regions. So we did that, and it's just something because the board ultimately, once again, y'all are going to be the ones who, when we come to you and say, so okay, the most terrible thing that could happen to us has happened. This is what we can do. We can look at it and say, geographically, what if we keep Maine, West, and Karen Grove open? Would that be best? Or do we keep the busiest two libraries open, which would be South and Maine, and would cut out vast areas of service? And so that's what we're looking at. If the tax fails, my suggestion in October would be if the tax fails that we consider cutting back some, reducing some things so that we're in a better situation for another round of bad news. You'd be filling no positions if the tax failed. It's a situation that I don't want to imagine, but I more or less have to. And I wanted you to have to imagine it too, because I don't want to come to you the third Monday of October and say, so, hey. So I just wanted it on the agenda so that, you know, you knew we had thought about options and what's left. And what's left is the ability to staff a few buildings, not many. And yeah, it wasn't a long discussion. It wasn't a lot of points. It was more or less all of the scenarios I gave you for trying to find money for Northeast. Imagine them as a holding pattern to prepare for a 7-month campaign to hope that we don't have to think about the unthinkable. But people need to know that if our budget is cut by 40%, there is no scenario where after that happens, we're open 9 locations, the same number of hours, the same amount of materials, the same staff. To give you an idea, if we were to decide, oh, well, we'll do it, but we'll use the fund balance, we could be open for about another year and 3 months maybe, and then the fund balance would be gone.
Annie, you're painting a picture of the possibility of maybe 1 or 2 of our libraries no longer operating?
No, 1 or 2 of our libraries still operating, or maybe 3.
Still operating. What
So
about
6.
the possibility of all of our operations having limited service so that our taxpayers realize that if you do not approve this, you are going to go from all of our main libraries that operate from 8 to 9 o'clock at night, possibly only operating 8 to 5.
Well, that was
only operating Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
That was part of my reason. My suggestion was for all of the things I suggested to look around while trying to figure out to serve Northeast.
Okay.
If we failed in October, if we made those changes, it would not only save money, but everyone who uses the library would see changes. They would see the access go down. It would be fiscally responsible for us because we would be making that deficit shrink until it becomes a giant unfixable deficit. But, so I would ask the board to limit the hours
Makes
and the
sense.
changes at all of the locations.
Because then everybody all over would feel the impact.
Yes.
Okay.
That's all I got. Nothing, there's no pleasant way of putting that except that if it passes, we're where we are now and we're working.
That's all I was gonna, that's the only thing I wanted to say is that it's just kind of a,
Sorry.
I mean, it's just getting this passed, which is so important, still just leaves us at status quo.
Yes.
And so,
But we're making headway on that too.
yeah, and you all are doing a great job in finding those areas that,
Can I ask Mike a question?
Sure.
So, I just realized today that the next board meeting is on September 20th, and there is a Karen Crowe City Council meeting on September 20th, in which I will be in attendance, because they have a library, and I would like them to keep their library. How does one request that we move a board meeting? Is that something I can ask the board? Does the board need to vote on something like that? Is there a provision? I don't know how that works.
I need to go back and have a look at the bylaws, which I don't have in front of me, but I think that, I don't think the bylaws require that you have any meeting on a set time. And I think the chairman has some authority to move those meetings around, but
I know we brought it up in January.
yeah, we did earlier in the year.
Yeah.
I just moved it when, weather was one of the issues.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And it
The
worked,
landing center early, one point he couldn't be here,
I think it worked out better too because of the way the vacation holidays had fallen.
and, yeah.
They said that gave more time in between the meetings or something, so, but everybody was here to look at the calendar, so I don't know if that works crazy.
So that's a done thing.
So we could do it, no,
Well, can we do it
we
tonight?
just do it till, move it to the Tuesday?
I move that we.
I'm not
move it.
available on Tuesdays. Just so, you know.
Or just the following
What date, what's the date of the Tuesday?
20th, you said?
It would be
The 20th is the Monday.
Yeah,
So it'd be the 21st of September?
yeah.
I would be available, I'm sorry.
may I make a suggestion? Just, this may not be absolutely necessary, but if we're going to follow the open meetings law to a T, dot the i's and cross the t's, and that what you should do is first someone, we had this conversation
Yeah, we did.
last meeting.
We did.
Have someone
So
should
I know where you go.
make a motion to take up a matter that's not on the agenda, that gets seconded, and
Has to
we
be
need a
unanimous
unanimous
vote.
vote to do that. And that matter being to reset the time of the board's next meeting, and then someone could make a subsequent motion, like I think you're about to do, to have the meeting on date X. That's what I would suggest you do.
I move that we move our September meeting from September 20th.
You have
I
to
think
make-
first,
you have to
I
make
would
a-
say motion number one is, I move that we take up a matter not on the agenda, that matter being to move the meeting, to change the meeting time of next month.
So first motion, make a motion. I make a motion that we put up an item on the agenda now, bring it up, that was not placed on the agenda. And that is to move the time and the date of the meeting for next month.
Yes.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second, and then we need a vote.
Yes.
And it has-
And public discussion, if any, on that matter.
All in favor?
Well, we did public discussion before the vote.
Oh,
Yeah.
Aye.
You want,
Okay. I'd like, now that we have a motion, to bring this motion up.
I move that we move the, the previously scheduled September 20th meeting to Tuesday, September the 21st.
Second.
all in favor?
Public discussion.
Oh, any discussion, I'm sorry. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? I don't think I asked any opposed on the first one. I think we were
No,
unanimous. All right, so that passes. So our next meeting will be Tuesday, September 21st, at 5:15. Thank you, Mr. Delaney. I think that's important. Also, reminder that yearly ethics training and sexual harassment training must be completed before December 31st, 2021. Any comments from the public on any other matter not on this agenda? No? All right. Thank you everyone for attending. The meeting's adjourned.
Thank you.
Ms. Robert?